take a look at the life of one of the most legendary Western stars, Charles Bronson. Before his death in 2003, Charles Bronson had worked as an actor in a career spanning almost 50 years. Bronson was best known as a Western star, in a time when the genre seemed to reach its peak popularity. In the mid-1970s, Bronson was considered one of the most popular actors in the world, and in 1975, only Robert Redford, Barbra Streisand, and Al Pacino drew more money in the box office. Unfortunately, Bronson also had an incredibly troubled life throughout his career. Bronson was married to 3 different women throughout his life. Reports during his lifetime also suggested that Bronson was incredibly introverted and snobby, having held several grudges during his career and refusing to work with anyone he didn't deem worthy enough of his time. Read on to discover some facts about this legend you probably never knew. Like many other Hollywood celebrities, especially at that time, Charles Bronson wasn't the actor's name, or at least it wasn't his real name at birth. Bronson was born Charles Denis Baczynski in 1921. Bronson's parents were immigrants from the Eastern European state of Lithuania, and Bronson was raised Roman Catholic. Bronson also wasn't the couple's only child. Bronson was child number 11 of 15 in the family, which would have made things incredibly challenging growing up. Bronson's father was named Walteris P. Buczynskis, which was anglicized to Walter Baczynski on his arrival in America. Naturally, given the time and the size of his family, Bronson grew up in an impoverished household. According to Bronson, the actor was made to work in the coal mines as a child after his father passed away. Bronson claimed that as a child, he was paid $1 a week for his work in the coal mines alongside his brothers. Despite the adversity, Bronson would go on to become the first member of his family to graduate from high school. Thankfully, the actor was eventually able to work his way out of his hard life and make a name for himself. It doesn't happen often that a celebrity has the same name as another famous person. In this case, Charles Bronson is not only the name of the famous actor but also the name of the infamous British prisoner. The criminal Charles Bronson, who is known as the most violent prisoner in Britain, has spent 44 years in prison, as well as in psychiatric hospitals for his violent behavior and mental illness. He legally changed his name to Charles Bronson in 1987 while working as a bare-knuckle boxer in London. Bronson was once even put into isolation, where he spent 40 days naked. The man, who has written books and about who a movie has been made, was initially imprisoned for armed robbery, but he soon gained a reputation in prison as a violent man. He attacked guards and fellow inmates, even taking hostages. After being released after his first stint in prison, he started bare-knuckle boxing and returned to prison after planning another robbery. When commenting on his own character, Bronson said, "I'm a nice guy, but sometimes I lose all my senses and become nasty. That doesn't make me evil, just confused." Despite his family's poor social standing, there did seem to be one expensive habit that Bronson picked up at a very young age. Bronson reportedly started smoking cigarettes at 9 years old. Before that, Bronson reportedly loved chewing tobacco and never could kick the habit. He would eventually move on to smoking tobacco from a pipe. Unfortunately for Bronson, his smoking habit would eventually lead to his death. While there is some confusion over the cause of his death certificate has several causes of death including respiratory failure and metastatic lung cancer, both conditions which would have been caused due to his lifetime of smoking. As a child, Bronson's family did many things to cut down on their expenses and make ends meet in incredibly difficult financial times for most people in the United States. According to Bronson, he would often attend school in his sister's dresses as the family could not afford to pay for his clothing. The Bronson children would often be forced to shave their heads as a way of avoiding head lice. Given that Bronson lived in a house of 15 children, any head lice in the family would have been passed on to all of the children. Bronson was eventually able to make a lot of money as an actor and was able to grow out his hair after his early childhood. As a result of being the child of immigrant parents, Bronson's first language wasn't English. Despite being born and raised in rural Pennsylvania, Bronson spoke Lithuanian at home with his family. Bronson would also learn how to speak Russian and Greek growing up, as well as English, making him a polyglot. As a result of his immigrant family, Bronson's English growing up was heavily accented. Many people who met Bronson believed him to be a foreigner in America. Bronson was eventually able to lose his accent and speak with an American accent, which could be heard in many of his movies. In 1943, at the age of 22, Bronson was enlisted in the United States Air Force during World War II. Bronson was stationed in Guam and Japan as a part of the 61st Bombardment Squadron. Bronson would receive a Purple Heart military award after he was wounded in battle during his service. Bronson would speak highly of his time served in the military, saying that his years of service came with several positive benefits. Bronson stated that the Army fed him well, gave him clothing, and allowed him to improve his English. His enlistment also meant that Bronson was able to leave behind his work in the coal mines. After leaving the armed forces, Bronson seemed to be trapped between his old coal mining life in rural Pennsylvania and starting a new life in Philadelphia. During that time, Bronson worked a series of odd jobs but was unable to find anything steady or serious. Bronson would also live in Atlantic City and New York before moving out west to Los Angeles. It was during this time that Bronson joined a local theatrical group and picked up his first acting roles. Bronson reportedly discovered acting after being invited to paint theater sets by a group of actors in Atlantic City. When living in New York City, Bronson lived with another aspiring actor who would also make a name for himself in show business. In the late 1940s, Bronson lived with actor Jack Klugman, who was also trying to make a name for himself as an actor in New York City. Klugman would have several high-profile credits to his name by the end of his career. Klugman started his career on the stage before getting more high-profile acting roles in film and television. Klugman was a cast member of the original 12 Angry Men movie and Cry Terror, as well as playing Walter Matthau as Felix Unger in The Odd Couple. Klugman also played the role of Quincy M.E. in the television series of the same name. In 1949, Bronson married his first wife, Harriet Tindler. Tindler and Bronson met when they were studying at an acting school in Philadelphia in 1947. Tindler was 18 years old when the couple met and was 8 years younger than her husband-to-be. Bronson eventually got the consent of Tindler's father, and the two were eventually wed. While the couple was very happy together, they were exceptionally poor. Tindler said that when they first started dating, Bronson had only a few cents in his pocket. Together, Bronson and Tindler had 2 children, a daughter named Suzanne and a son named Tony. The couple divorced in 1965 before Bronson had reached the peak of his popularity. In the 1950s, America was towards the beginning of a decades-long conflict against the USSR. At the time, a political group, led by Senator Joe McCarthy, began attempting to out any Americans who were loyal to communism or the Soviet government. This led to the creation of trials and hearings that targeted both those of left-wing politics and Eastern European backgrounds. As a result of the prevailing political attitudes of the time, Bronson changed his family name from the very Eastern European-sounding Baczynski to the more American-sounding last name of Bronson. While it's unclear how much the name change may have helped Bronson establish himself as an actor, it certainly didn't hurt, especially at a time when other Hollywood celebrities were being targeted. Charles Bronson would eventually become a bright star, but his career in acting didn't get off to a great start. Bronson's first film appearance came in the 1951 film You're in the Navy Now. The film starred Gary Cooper and Jane Greer and focused on the exploits aboard the patrol craft 1168. Bronson was only given the result for his ability to burp on command. Bronson played an engine room sailor called Wasilewski who was going to represent the ship in the boxing tournament. Bronson's character breaks his ribs in the lead-up to the fight and is replaced by an ensign named Tony Barbeau. In 1954, Bronson was again acting alongside Gary Cooper in a Western film called Vera Cruz. Vera Cruz sees Cooper playing an ex-Confederate soldier who travels to Mexico and works as a mercenary. Cooper's character, Ben Train, eventually joins up with a gunslinger named Joe Aaron, played by Burt Lancaster. One of Aaron's gang of cutthroats is Pittsburgh, played by Charles Bronson. One day while filming, Bronson and another actor Ernest Borgnine left the set to go into a nearby town. Instead of getting dressed in their regular clothes, the two left still dressed in their costumes. As a result of which, the two actors were accosted by Mexican police who subsequently arrested the duo until they were able to prove who they were. In the late 50s, Bronson would become a leading man in Hollywood, albeit in a string of low-budget films and television shows. Unfortunately, he struggled to make the jump into becoming a true household name. In 1960, Bronson was able to score a role in The Magnificent Seven in the supporting cast. Despite building a solid reputation, Bronson's breakout performance as a lead actor didn't come until 1974. Bronson would play the lead character of Paul Kersey in Death Wish. On a budget of $3.7 million, the movie made over $20 million at the box office and was the most popular American movie in Bronson's entire career. Bronson was 53 years old when Death Wish came out in America, 14 years after his performance in The Magnificent Seven. Despite being seen as shy, Bronson managed to make some incredible friends while working as an actor over the years. Bronson managed to live with Jack Klugman in New York City before either man broke into the acting business. However, Klugman was not Bronson's only famous acting friend. Bronson also befriended the legendary Steve McQueen while working together on the 1959 film Never So Few. Bronson and McQueen would act together again the following year in The Magnificent Seven, and finally for a third time in 1963's The Great Escape. In the classic The Great Escape, Bronson played a character called Danny Tunnel King Belinsky. Bronson's character is stuck in a German prisoner of war camp known as Stalag 17. Bronson shares many character traits with Belinsky that are revealed throughout the movie. Both Bronson and Belinsky were involved in World War II, while Belinsky was a Polish refugee and joined the English Army in their fight against the Nazis. Bronson served in the U.S. Air Force in East Asia. Bronson and Belinsky both have experience in tunnels, with Bronson having worked in coal mines as a child while Walensky is the camp's resident tunnel expert. In an ironic twist, both Bronson and Walensky suffered from claustrophobia. Given the fact that many of the tunnels that scenes were filmed in, it would have made for an incredibly comfortable experience. Despite being born and raised in the United States, Bronson was first a star in Europe. Unlike in the United States, Bronson was considered a massive success in Italy and France. In the late 1960s, Charles Bronson was cast in several European-produced films. Bronson played the lead in the French film Adieu l'ami alongside Alain Delon. Bronson was then cast in Once Upon a Time in the West where he played the main villain against Henry Fonda. Italian director Sergio Leone called Bronson the greatest actor he ever worked with, and Bronson was given the nickname of Il Bruto in Italy. Bronson spent a long time starring in low-budget films and as a supporting actor before breaking it big. In the 60s, Bronson experienced success in Europe, but his movies generally failed to make much money in the United States box office. Bronson returned to the United States in the early 70s and began to receive great box office returns in the United States. In 1972, Bronson signed with major production company United Artists, the company founded by Charlie Chaplin and other actors. In 1973, Bronson became the biggest box office star in the world and was paid $1 million per film. Charles Bronson and his wife Harriet Tindler would divorce in 1965, 18 years after they started dating, and 16 years after they were married. From 1965 to 1968, even before their divorce, Bronson was ready to move on after meeting English actress Jill Ireland in 1962. While Bronson was still married to Tindler at the time, Ireland was married to David McCallum. McCallum and Bronson worked together on The Great Escape, where Bronson reportedly told his Scottish co-star that he was going to marry McCallum's wife. 3 years after Bronson's divorce from Tindler, a year after Ireland's divorce was finalized, Bronson and Ireland got married in 1968. The two remained together until Ireland's death from breast cancer in 1990. The couple had 2 children together, Zuleika and Katrina, the latter of whom was adopted. It wasn't just off-screen that Bronson and Ireland could be seen together. While the couple was together, Bronson was at his most popular, and the couple worked together in 15 separate films. Some of the films Ireland and Bronson would star together include Villa Rides, The Mechanic, Breckhart Pass, Chateau's Land, and The Valachi Papers. Ireland would also be cast as Bronson's love interest in Death Wish 2, Jerry Nichols. Ireland and Bronson's last collaboration came in 1987. 5 years after Death Wish 2, after Ireland had gone through surgery and treatment for breast cancer. One of the many actors Bronson was frequently cast alongside was Lee Marvin. Lee Marvin and Bronson first worked alongside each other in Bronson's film debut You're in the Navy Now. The pair also worked together several times throughout their respective careers. The pair received top billing in movies like Death Hunt, Yukon, The Meanest Men in the West, and The Dirty Dozen. It's somewhat surprising that the two actors worked together so often, especially given how much Bronson reportedly hated working with Marvin and had an incredibly difficult experience during the filming of one of their earliest projects together, The Dirty Dozen. Bronson was reportedly infuriated with Marvin's penchant for leaving the set to get drunk during filming. Bronson was also upset because the studio wanted him to cut his hair for the role, something he only did after the studio threatened to sue him in court. Many stars have turned down roles for various reasons only to see the project become a massive hit. Charles Bronson is certainly no exception to that rule, having turned down quite a few projects that made a lot of money at the box office and turned their leading actors into stars. Bronson was offered the lead role in A Fistful of Dollars by director Sergio Leone, only to decline the role because he believed the script was bad. The part went to Clint Eastwood, and the movie made over $14 million at the box office. Leone attempted to offer the lead role to Bronson in the sequel and offered multiple parts in the third film of the Man with No Name trilogy. While Bronson declined the role in the sequel because he hated the script again, he was keen to take the offered role in the third film but was forced to decline as he was already committed to filming The Dirty Dozen at the time. One of the other roles that Bronson was considered for was the part of Superman in the first ever big-budget live adaptation of the comic book Man of Steel. Bronson auditioned for the part alongside the likes of Sylvester Stallone, Bruce Jenner, and Kris Kristofferson. In the end, Bronson was rejected for the part, as the casting people believed that his look was too earthy to play the Kryptonian. It's pretty impressive that Bronson even auditioned for the part considering he was 57 years old when the movie was released and 3 years older than Marlon Brando, who played Superman's father Jor-El in the movie. The part of Superman was played by 26-year-old Christopher Reeve. One of the most popular roles Bronson ever played was Paul Kersey, an architect come vigilante. In the film, Bronson's character snapped after home invaders murdered his wife and assaulted his daughter. The film was based on a book by author Brian Garfield. Despite rejecting previously violent films, Bronson accepted the casting in this one. While some critics believe the film glorifies vigilantism, Bronson took an alternative view when analyzing the message of the movie. According to Bronson, the film's lesson shows that vigilante justice makes the whole world blind. In 1975, Charles Bronson starred in a movie called Hard Times where he played a bare-knuckle boxer. Bronson's co-star for the film was James Coburn, who played Spencer West, who acts as Bronson's manager in the film. Coburn and Bronson had previously worked together on The Magnificent Seven and A Great Escape. However, in those two movies, Bronson played a supporting actor, and that was not the case in Hard Times. The movie saw Bronson receive top billing with Coburn playing the supporting act. This caused issues on set as Coburn didn't believe that Bronson was a big enough star to helm the project ahead of him. Coburn wasn't the only person that had an issue with a co-star on the set of Hard Times. Bronson also took issue with the director, Walter Hill, after he reportedly criticized Jill Ireland's acting. Bronson, who was married to Ireland at the time, took exception to the criticism. For the remainder of the film, and for the rest of his life, Bronson carried a grudge against Hill for slighting the love of his life. Bronson and Hill never worked together for the remainder of his career. Ireland lived a further 15 years before passing away from breast cancer. Many people believe that Bronson was arrogant and dismissive during his career. Bronson was not keen on shaking hands with colleagues and fans. Some historians believe that Bronson had a reason for avoiding handshakes that remained a mystery during his life. According to some historians, Bronson lived his life having suffered from obsessive-compulsive disorder. Bronson was fearful of germs throughout his career and was terrified of falling ill with an infection. Unfortunately, Bronson was never tested for, and since he passed away in 2003, it's likely to remain a mystery. Bronson experienced several outbursts, including the set of The Dirty Dozen. Bronson was the victim of pranks from co-stars Jim Brown and Donald Sutherland. Bronson even walked out on the premiere of the film when he went to see it. One of Bronson's co-stars described Bronson as a time bomb. According to John Huston, working with Bronson was like working with a grenade with the pin pulled. Reports about Bronson's life explain that the actor lived with several fears during his lifetime. After working in the mines as a child, Bronson suffered from claustrophobia, which would have made his experience as a tunnel digger in The Great Escape difficult. These were not Bronson's only fears. Another fear that Bronson had was a fear of fire. This caused Bronson to take precautionary measures when traveling, including staying in hotels that never had more than 2 floors. Bronson believed that in the case of a fire breaking out at the hotel, he and his family would be able to escape to safety if they were only on the 2nd floor at most. Unlike many Hollywood stars, Bronson was unable to accumulate many awards over the course of his career. Bronson would win a Henrietta Award for World Film Favorite that he split with Sean Connery. In 1961, Bronson was nominated for an Emmy for his role of Soldier Conlon in the General Electric Theater series on CBS. During her life, Bronson was completely unaware of the existence of Audrey Nauer. However, after her passing, the actor was left a parting gift by Nauer. The will also stipulated that any part of the estate Bronson didn't want should be donated to the Louisville Free Public Library. However, her family contested the will, claiming that the new one was made when Nauer was not of a sound mind. 8 years after her death, Bronson married for a third and final time to a woman named Kim Weeks. Weeks had previously worked for a company called Dove Audio. The two met when Weeks helped with creating an audiobook version of Jill Ireland's memoirs. The couple wed despite Weeks being 39 years younger than the aging actor. Bronson was 77 years old at their wedding, compared to the much younger 38-year-old Weeks. The couple remained married up until Bronson's death in 2003 at the age of 81. Over the course of his life, Bronson was a parent to several children, many of whom were not biologically his own. Bronson had 2 biological children with his first wife, had 3 stepchildren with Jill Ireland from her previous marriage on top of an adopted daughter, and a 3rd biological child. As Bronson got older, his health began to slowly deteriorate. Having outlived his second wife, Jill Ireland, Bronson had surgery in 1998, forcing him to retire from acting. The actor would pass away in August 2003 at the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center before passing away. While some believe Bronson died due to pneumonia and Alzheimer's, the official cause of death would be listed as respiratory failure and lung cancer as the primary cause of death.